Some things are just comforting. For example, I could watch The Phantom Toll Booth from 1969, directed by Chuck Jones, over and over and over again and be quite content.
Time is a gift given to you, given to give you the time you need to have the time of your life.
The same is true of the Under the Umbrella Tree Christmas special, especially the part when Jake ices over the driveway to play hockey.
We only need one more layer of water on the ice with the hose.
Okay, Jake, I'll go get my coat.
Yeah.
But I'm not here today to sing the praises of those two pieces of well-loved media from my childhood, though I just did. This time I'm talking about something you knew would show up at some point. Once again, just look at what I and this channel are obsessed with. Today, I am tackling manga and anime. I'm tackling one manga and anime in particular. My entry into manga and anime was at my birthday party where a friend brought over a copy of Ranma 1/2 and I became hooked.
Meet Ranma Saotome of the Anything Goes School of Martial Arts.
Go!
And here's Akane of the Tendo Training Hall.
What are you doing?
The two have been engaged to marry by their loving parents.
I didn't ask for this. Who asked you?
As for the cause of poor Ranma's suffering,
What did you ask for?
when Ranma is splashed with cold water, he becomes a she.
I began weekly treks to the local comic book store to track down copies of the latest release, those early 2000s, late 90s Viz releases with bindings almost as weak as the D&D Player's Handbook. I read and reread those works, got into Tezuka from grabbing the last book of Message to Adolf, then released as simply Adolf, and began sucking up everything I could about Rumiko Takahashi. I've even got this Lamour Sayatsura book from 1990. The modern translations are better, so I'd recommend picking up those instead. But the one that I loved more than anything else, more than martial arts gender swapping, historical fantasy, interrogations of World War II, and more than really anything for a time, was the one that my mother once called a soap opera. And it really is. And that soap opera, drawn to perfection by Rumiko Takahashi's Maison Ikkoku, a series I will eventually bought all of twice, unless another edition comes out, in which case...
Shut up and take my money.
I'll be talking about the manga here, but the anime follows the story fairly closely with only one OVA that is worth a watch. There's also a TV drama that compresses the story a little too much for my liking, and an even earlier TV drama from 1986 called Apartment Fantasy, which is, in my opinion, a lesser adaptation. With all that past as prologue, as the bard basically said, let's get into it. Maison Ikkoku tells the story of Yusaku Godai, a moribund, would-be college student who can't seem to pass his entrance exams. He lives in a boarding house where all sorts of wacky characters like the mysterious Mr. Yatsuya and the lush and fairly exhibitionist Akemi Roppongi live. The people at the house basically live there out of necessity, even as 1980s Tokyo is modernizing and going through the boom and bust cycle that allows me to play a clip or so from the Like a Dragon series entry, Yakuza 0. Godai is about to leave the boarding house for good when a mysterious and beautiful new house manager shows up. She is older than him, though not by too much, and he is immediately smitten. His housemates immediately make fun of him for this. Their chief bit of fun in life is interfering between Godai and this manager, one Kyoko Otonashi by name. I've read that this series was intended originally to focus on all of the characters in more of a Tales from the Boarding House anthology style, but the relationship between Kyoko and Godai becomes all-consuming. Godai is our point of view character, though at opportune points we see things from Kyoko's point of view. You see, she is resistant to Godai's advances at first because she is not over the recent death of her first husband. From there, the whole tale unspools as Godai and Kyoko become embroiled in multiple love quadrangles.
Teach me the math of love triangles. Yay, time for book facts.
Polyamory would have solved this, but it wouldn't be the right call for these particular characters, except for maybe Akemi.
I was here having a good time with some guy. Then he left saying I'd had too much to drink. I mean, look, it's not so much. Take me home, would you?
Kyoko sometimes dates tennis coach and dog phobe Shun Mitaka, while Godai also ends up dating work acquaintance Kozue Nanao. So, of course, Godai is jealous of Shun, while Kyoko is jealous of Kozue. Everyone at the boarding house knows of this jealousy right away. So, because they can and because it's very fun for them, they continue to interfere with and mess with this relationship between Godai and Kyoko. For example, when Yusaku is tutoring Kyoko's niece, he maneuvers a beach day, hoping to get some time in with his crush. His neighbor, Mrs. Ichinose, invites Coach Mitaka along.
Calling him was your bright idea, wasn't it?
You forget that trains cost money, Mr. Moneybags.
We're so sorry to impose on you.
Oh, no. In fact, I was just thinking how much I'd like a nice swim.
Coach?
Hey, Godai.
To make things more interesting, the niece and Ichinose's son sneak along Kyoko's dog, whose name's Soichiro, which is the name of Kyoko's dead husband, something that originally unnerves Godai. Soichiro is a good boy, and this kind of complicated plot that unspools in a slapstick manner is emblematic of Maison Ikkoku. It could still be a good trip, right? Except that Mitaka is afraid of dogs, Yusaku can't drive, and Kyoko is an insane driver. They all get mad at each other and apologetic to each other in equal measure at the beach in a love triangle way that the kids just can't understand.
You seem very popular.
Yes, well, guess I'm the kind of guy girls take advantage of. Say, how about a boat ride?
Oh, why not?
Yeah, why not?
It's misunderstanding after misunderstanding, even when Godai drunkenly confesses his love. For more on that, see the short essay by Helen Chazan that I've linked to in the description below. There are more suitors, more complex ways that the universe both slams the couple together and tears them apart. But it all comes down to the last few episodes, the last few stories. They finally admit they love each other, but only after sharing their insecurities outside of a love hotel. After all, Godai through the series does not succeed. He fails over and over and over again like a character in a Samuel Beckett play. When he gets a job at big business, he's quickly let go because of the boom and bust mentioned earlier. His part-time job as a teacher's assistant spurs him along until he cannot be paid for anymore. He has to make the decision to do something, to risk something. So he goes back to school and becomes a teacher. He has to grow up and he has to actually struggle through things rather than take the flunk out path of least resistance that he starts with.
Hey, now wait a minute here. I ain't some little kid, you know.
How dare you say that after all this? If I say you're a child, you're a child!
And Kyoko has to grow too, but most of her growth is growing to love what different people mean to her. She needed to make room in her heart after the death of her first husband, Soichiro, who seemed to have taken up her whole world. Her moving into Maison Ikkoku actually opened that world up to her. She was closed off before, but the series opens her up to the wide and wacky world around her. As for Godai's relationship with her first husband, Soichiro, Godai admits that at first he was jealous or worried he couldn't measure up. He couldn't be what Soichiro was to Kyoko.
どうだい?美しいだろう。
宗一郎さん。
京子。
But Soichiro is part of who Kyoko is, the woman he loves, so he has to love him in that part of her too. Godai is often very foolish, hoisted by the petard of his own kindness. An example, Godai's friend Sakamoto leaves him in charge of his pet cat named Kyoko Baby in the version I'm most familiar with.
You know, a kitty cat drinks milk, goes meow meow.
I know what a cat is, but since when did I promise to watch one for you?
Last night. Huh? And don't you dare say you didn't.
So of course he loses the cat and then goes around calling out its name, which disturbs Kyoko because how dare he call out for her so casually?
That's enough, Kyoko. Come out of there. You can't hide all day, you know. Oh, come on out already, will ya?
Godai? Is there anything wrong? Godai, open the door.
Just a minute.
There's also this very good gag where someone overhears him explaining that the cats sleep next to him at night, and, of course, it's misunderstood completely.
Ooh, Kyoko? She's doing great.
Geez, ain't you acting awful familiar?
Yep, we're sleeping together every night.
He told you that he and I did what?
And since when, if I may ask, did I start crawling into your bed at night?
What? What? Huh?
In the end of the story, though, the cat ends up snuggled up next to the dog Soichiro, so it's Kyoko and Soichiro.
Well, what do you know? That's a Kyoko for you.
Like Romeo and Juliet, if these people would just talk to each other, they would be fine.
Sit down and talk!
I can freak out about the problems with Friar Lawrence another time. Other things happen in the same manner. On the day of an important interview, as I've alluded to before, Godai helps a pregnant woman to the hospital to deliver her baby.
Everything's gonna be fine. The ambulance is here. Over here! There you go. You'll be in good hands.
You can come with us in the ambulance.
He even gives her a good luck charm he bought earlier.
You mean you've been carrying this in your pocket all the time?
Maybe it was my destiny to be here instead of at the interview. I want you to have this. Here. It's a lucky charm to wish you an easy birth.
Why, thank you.
You're welcome.
It turns out that he doesn't get the job because he doesn't show up. But the husband who couldn't be there shows up and explains that Godai was saying he had to go to the interview the whole time. He looks like he's complaining as he's helping the woman and ushered into the ambulance, but he never just gets out. He goes along because he cares about other people. So Godai, the main focus character, does slowly grow up. He's definitely changed from the flunking student in the first chapter. His ups and downs and the round and round will they or won't they carousel is what makes him into his final form, a full and honest partner with Kyoko. One thing I appreciate about this story is that it has an ending. A lot of Takahashi's work that isn't self-contained doesn't end so much as give the promise of an ending with a glimpse at possible continuation. Ranma 1/2, for example, does this after a final wedding attempt, the last panel of that series promising that they will go on and have adventures which did lead to lots and lots of fan fiction. And like Calvin and Hobbes exploring the world, Ranma and Akane do go on in our imaginations round and round in the same old way. But Yusaku and Kyoko, they have an ending. They get married. They are endgame status. Their friends who caused them so much problems say that they would have stopped as soon as the two lovebirds were honest with each other and could just say how they feel. That they've been rooting for them all along and that their shenanigans were in order to push them together. And we do get to see their child, Haruka.
学校の勉強は大丈夫なのか?
ちょっと心配だけど、遅れた分の勉強は頑張って追いつくようにするよ。それとも、おじさんが勉強を教えてくれる？
あいにくだが。俺も勉強は苦手な方でな。社会勉強だったらいくらでも教えてやるぞ。
No, not that one.
Hi, we're home. Here she is, our new mom.
Let's have a look. Let me see. Oh, such a beautiful baby.
I guess she must take after her dad.
So it's a girl? Did you give her a name yet?
Haruka, fragrance of spring.
Aw, Haruka. That's a lovely name.
The series is, of course, not without its faults. It's very much of its place and of its time. There's quite a lot of hitting and slapstick violence. Godai and Mitaka also do several times get into fights, but this is the same exact beat in the final episode of Ted Lasso between Jamie Tart and Roy Kent.
Fucking hell.
He's fine.
All right. You gonna tell me what happened? Did you stop a mugging?
We're fucking idiots.
But it's pretty much the same level of violence as a comedy you would see in 1980s America, like Sam and Diane of Cheers.
Oh, just like Sam and Diane. I hated Sam and Diane.
Who are Sam and Diane?
It's also like Akane's malleting of Ranma and Kagome's making Inuyasha sit.
Sit, boy! Sit, boy!
It seemed good for the time, but we have to look back on it and maybe cast a side glance. That doesn't mean we can't enjoy it, but hopefully the way that we construct these jokes has moved on. I do want to return for a moment to this idea of kindness and of finding your own path in life, because that's what this series has meant to me. Yusaku failed over and over and over again, but he never, ever stopped trying different things. And as you know from the logo I've adopted for this channel, that means quite a lot around here. Kyoko too has to find her own pathway in life and has to learn how to move on from her traumas, has to learn how to trust people after the devastation of her late husband's early death. Mitaka too has to learn to actually be kind to himself and not caught up in his own image. His journey ends with him marrying a woman who has multiple dogs, the very thing that he's afraid of. An arranged marriage, once again signaling the different time and place of the series. And of course, he gets his own little dog, which for all you Never Have I Ever fans is named McEnroe.
Whoa, it's me. Small world.
I guess he was some kind of tennis player before he was a narrator of a fun teen drama you should check out if you haven't yet. This focus on kindness, this focus on being honest with each other, this focus on finding the way to communicate along with the idea that the pathway you tread cannot just be the one that others do, that is what speaks to me. So, as I, in the text of Maison Ikkoku and Jimmy Clef, have all already said,
but you must try and try. You'll succeed at last.
Wow, that felt like a long one, but I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, go ahead down there and leave a comment and certainly a like. Thus ends the unspoken contractual begging that is obligate of such videos. And as Soichiro would say,
Ah,